Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something really fascinating. We are uncovering a profound indigenous alternative to the modern ecological crises we're all facing today. We often just assume that modernity only developed in one specific way, the Western way, which was heavily driven by the conquest of nature. But today, we're exploring Donghak's Johwajeong view of Earth and its blueprint for an autogenous or basically self-sustaining modernity. It's a real paradigm shift, so let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to break this down into 1. Western material Earth view. 2. Eastern condensed Earth view. 3. The East-West clash. 4. Donghak's indigenous modernity. And finally, 5. A modern vision for coexistence. Section 1. Western material Earth view. So historically speaking, the West and the East looked at the ground beneath their feet in completely, fundamentally different ways. In the Western material view, the Earth is seen primarily as just raw material, right? It's like a physical stage where transcendent forms or divine ideas are realized. But in contrast, the Eastern condensed view sees the Earth entirely differently, not as inert matter, but as a deeply interacting entity that actually condenses the energies of heaven and earth into a physical form. Actually, a good way to think about it is the difference between seeing a block of marble just waiting to be carved versus a seed actively growing into a tree. To see where that Western view actually comes from, we gotta look back to classical antiquity. Think about Aristotle's concept of the four elements, earth, water, air, and fire. That concept eventually evolved into a deeply atomistic worldview. In this substantialist model, nature is basically broken down into its base independent parts, like a giant puzzle. Now, we absolutely have to acknowledge that this way of thinking was incredibly powerful. It laid the very foundation for the scientific method and the Industrial Revolution. But here is the surprising hidden cost. By breaking nature down into separate, lifeless parts, we effectively turned the Earth into a mere object of domination. We totally separated humanity from the natural world, creating this conqueror and conquered dynamic that, honestly, we are still paying for today.
Section 2. Eastern Condensed Earth View.
Now, what's really interesting about the traditional Eastern framework, concepts like yin-yang and the 5 phases, is just how different it is from the Western model. Instead of isolated atoms or rigid substances, this entire framework is based on correlative relationships. In this worldview, you don't look at a tree or a river as just an isolated object. Instead, you emphasize its attributes and how it constantly interacts with everything else in the system. The focus is entirely on the flow of energy. It's that constant dynamic push and pull between the elements. It's a living ecosystem of relationships rather than just a static catalog of separate things. Let's break down the core traits of this condensed view of Earth. First and foremost, heaven and earth are in continuous interaction. The Earth acts as this incredible vessel that condenses universal energy to create all living things. And because of this profound, deep connection, the Earth is literally never viewed as a tool or some passive object meant for human domination. Furthermore, there is a beautiful concept here known as Tianwanjiang. Think of it as the perfect harmony between the temporality of the sky and the spatiality of the Earth. In this framework, humanity, heaven, and earth are equal, interacting partners. It entirely avoids that master-subject dynamic that fueled Western industrialization.
Section 3. The East-West Clash.
So, how did this change? Well, we can trace exactly how the traditional Eastern worldview was fractured. The friction started intellectually in the early 17th century, right when Jesuit missionary Matteo Ricci introduced Western cosmological and philosophical concepts to East Asia. But the real breaking point? That came in 1860 with the Treaty of Beijing. That marked a severe escalation of Western imperialist expansion and raw material conflict. The sheer force of Western military and industrial might sent this schizophrenic shock throughout Asia. It was a deep existential crisis. Suddenly, traditional worldviews were seemingly powerless against Western gunboats. And it was in this exact pressure cooker, in that very same year of 1860, that Donghak thought was born as a desperate yet incredibly powerful response to this crisis. This massive collision utterly shattered the traditional balance. We saw the rise of Cheonjeonjibi, which was a rigid new hierarchical order declaring that heaven is high and the earth is low. It completely destroyed their original equal partnership. Yin and yang became totally unbalanced and fixated. The pursuit of material wealth completely overshadowed any deeper harmonies. And ultimately, this led to what's called Johwajeong III, the complete and tragic severance of the relationship between heaven and earth. So this collision didn't just break a philosophical model. It essentially set the stage for the ecological revenge and the crises of coexistence that we are actively suffering through today.
Section 4. Donghak's indigenous modernity.
So, the crucial point is this brilliant concept right at the heart of Donghak's response, Johwajeong. It translates roughly to a formalized view of harmony and justice, actively realizing an order of coexistence. What's amazing is that it intentionally transcends the dual opposition, that extreme polarization of heaven-earth and the spiritual realm. Rather than choosing between the hypermaterialism of the invading West or just retreating into outdated dogmas, Donghak used Johwajeong to forge an autogenous modernity, basically a way to modernize entirely on their own terms, rooted in their own soil.
And to really make Johwajeong work, you have to understand this key term, liminality. Liminality is all about the transcendence of boundaries. In the context of Donghak thought, it means expanding beyond those strict, rigid borders that separate the transcendent, divine world from the immanent, physical world of Earth and humanity. When the East and West clashed, those boundaries became impenetrable walls. Donghak uses liminality as the ultimate bridge to break down those walls and reconnect the severed relationship between heaven, Earth, and humanity. It's all about existing in the fluid space between extremes to find true balance.
All of this builds into Donghak's autogenous or indigenous modernity. And it's fascinating because Donghak didn't just blindly reject everything from the outside, not at all. They critically fused elements of Taoism, Confucianism, and even Sohak, which is Western learning, into something entirely new. Crucially, this wasn't just some ivory tower philosophy. It was highly performance-oriented. It was meant for practical application in the daily lives of everyday people. It demanded the equal participation of all citizens, practically breaking down rigid social castes overnight. Ultimately, the whole thing was driven by the pursuit of songsang, mutual life, harmony, and coexistence. They created a self-sustaining modernity entirely independent of the Western model of environmental and social domination.
Section 5. A modern vision for coexistence.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why this matters for us today. We have pushed the Western material view of Earth to its absolute limits, haven't we? And the result is a fractured society and a rapidly warming planet. Donghak's autogenous modernity proves that there is a historical, self-sustaining ideological basis for treating the Earth not as a resource to be extracted, but as an equal partner in ecological harmony and equality. It's a framework proving that progress doesn't inherently have to equal destruction. Which leaves us with this final thought. In an era where our current ecological crisis feels just incredibly overwhelming, we desperately need new ways of thinking. We've seen exactly how the atomistic view of dividing and conquering nature has played out. So what do you think? Can Donghak's autogenous vision of liminality, of breaking down boundaries and embracing songsang, true coexistence, offer us the new path forward that we so urgently need? It's a profound question to consider as we look toward the future of our relationship with the Earth. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this sparks some deep curiosity about the alternative paths our world can take.